Hello, and welcome back to the 5th episode of Gaming Reversal. This is a podcast meant to bring you some of the greatest and most horrible gems of video game history to light. Today is June 19th, 2018, and I'm your host, Steven Vecchiarelli. But that's not important. What's important is what we're talking about this week. Before I get started, if you have any game suggestions, comments, questions, or anything, you can email us at gamingreversalpodcast@gmail.com, and timestamps for every game discussed in this podcast can be found in the description of YouTube, Libsyn, iTunes, and Google Play. Let's get started. This week's games are The Last of Us from 2013, Zelda Breath of the Wild from 2017, Bloodborne from 2015, Tomb Raider from 2013, Silent Hill 2 from 2001, and then next week's games are Cuphead from 2017, Resident Evil 7 from 2017, Dead Space from 2008, Skate from 2007, and Bioshock from 2007. If you haven't gotten the drift, basically every week we try and talk about 2 feature games. They normally are games that have come out in like the past maybe 2 years, maybe a year. It's really ranging with like The Last of Us this week. This was mainly because E3 was last week and The Last of Us 2 was the biggest game shown there, in my opinion, one of the biggest. And then Zelda Breath of the Wild is obvious. That's a game that came out in the past year. And then on top of that, we have 3 old games. Those games can range from 2001 with Silent Hill, but all the way up until like I think I had Tomb Raider this week. That's from 2013. Games are really, it's just a subjective thing. Like whatever comes to mind or whatever I think of, like, yeah, I should cover that. So getting started. We're going to start with Zelda Breath of the Wild this week. If you haven't played Zelda before, which you definitely have if you're listening to this podcast, you've heard of it. You've heard of some kind of iteration of it. It's a third-person light RPG from Nintendo that basically focuses around Link as he adventures around various worlds and basically tries to always defeat a common enemy that is Ganondorf. In this game, it's Calamity Ganondorf. I've played probably around 5 or 6 hours in it. So yeah, just getting started. Like the last Zelda game I played before this was Zelda Wind Waker. I played Skyward Sword for maybe like an hour and I hated it. I thought it was really gimmicky. I hated the Wii motion controls. And then past that, I don't think Spirit Tracks was before that. Phantom Hourglass was before that. I didn't play any of the 3DS ones between a Link Between Worlds or anything like that. So yeah, this week is Breath of the Wild. So like I said, third-person RPG. Light RPG made by Nintendo, originating on the NES. It's a very common. Like if you haven't heard of this, just look up on Wikipedia. How have you not heard of Zelda? So in this game, you're following Link as he's adventuring through an open world space, which I think was reminiscent of Ocarina of Time. I feel like Zelda Wind Waker, maybe from my perspective, was more of a linear path or a set path. Like you start on the island and then, you know, your sister's there or whatever, whoever her name is, and then she gets taken, and you're trying to adventure, and then you're going into the woods and you get your sword, and then you're put on this island, and then you meet like these falcon people, whatever. This game, it feels like you load in and you find the Sheikah slate. It tells you what to do. There's some Switch mechanics because I played it on Nintendo Switch. You go out into this open world. You meet an old man who promises you a paraglider if you find these 3 shrines and then get these orbs from the shrines and bring them back to him. Yeah, like right from the start, like one of the shrines is like in a snowy area, and one of the shrines is guarded by this like tower thing that'll like one-shot you if it attacks you. It's all over the place. Like it's just an open world. Like you load in, and while it is a tutorial level, and it's relatively, I would say it's a little boring, like most tutorial levels are. It really gives you a feel of what this game's going to be because you load in, it's open world, and they don't really tell you what to do besides go to these 3 shrines and get to work. Like, it's not like they're telling you, go here and talk to this guy and then do this. The guy's literally like, open up your Sheikah slate, mark some pins on a map, go to the temples, get the orbs, come back to me. That's your tutorial level. Along the way, you encounter enemies. They're called bonobos or something like that. It's not like you get the Master Sword right off the bat or anything like that. You're getting these different orbs. You get a paraglider. You go down. You meet a whole bunch of different NPCs. You go to this thing called the fairy fountain. It's all over the place. I'm not gonna go too deep into the story because I feel like it's something you have to experience personally. That's something I don't know. While I do enjoy Zelda stories, I feel like they're just all accounting for the same thing. You're trying to defeat Ganondorf in a different environment with different enemies, and then like maybe a few gimmicks here and there. So you wake up in this pool, you don't remember anything, you meet the old man, like I said, you do all that. But then you reach a point where the world opens up, and there's different like mechanics, like I said, with the Switch mechanics. Like you get the Sheikah Slate, and then through the Sheikah Slate you can like scan things, which is kind of weird. Like you can like bring up a map and you'll mark a really far away distance, and it's kind of annoying from my perspective because I'm like swinging my Switch around the room trying to point it in the right direction. So that got kind of annoying. Plus I'm not using a controller. I've heard you should use a controller with this, but I always use my Switch for portable. So yeah, maybe I'm in the minority there. And then like you're exploring these worlds. You get different outfits. That's something different in Zelda. Like I feel like normally they force you into the green tunic and the hat and all that, and then go on your way. Whereas this game, you could get different armor, and armor equates to more health or more just defensive capability. I think that's something they took differently in this game as opposed to Zelda. On top of that, I haven't gotten the Master Sword yet. I don't know if you do get it eventually. I haven't. I need to play more of it, obviously. It's a 40-hour game, and I have to review five games every week for a podcast. Sue me. So you're running around this world. You got different outfits. The only weapons I've encountered were like the woodcutter's axe or the Bonokobo club or the is it a trainee's sword? I don't remember what it was. Adventurer's sword maybe. And then you get more weapons along the way. You get different powers. You get magnetism, time stop, bombs, square bombs, all that. And then they all do obviously what they say, which is cool. That's something I think that wasn't in Wind Waker too much. So you got like the iron bands that like gave you the capability to lift heavy things or anything like that. But that's something that this game they're just like throwing it at you. They're like, yeah, you have different abilities from these shrines that you want to explore, which is it gives you a bit of a motivation to explore the world and encounter different things. So yeah, it's something different. I feel is that you're super delicate in this game if you don't have armor of any kind, meaning like you have three hearts, like three, that's basically means you get hit 3 times and you're dead. Also, I don't remember there being a stamina bar in any of the Zelda games. This one, there is one if you want to climb for a long time, if you want to sprint, or anything like that. Cooking, I don't think was ever a big theme in Zelda games. This game, you could cook. You combine different herbs and different food, and it gives you different things. Like maybe if you want to not be chilly, this thing warms you up, and then you could go through snowy weather, or this thing restores health, or this, I don't know, anything like that. Another Switch mechanic, by the way, that bothered me, that it just reminded me of that when I was using a bow and arrow. Using a bow and arrow with a Switch, it tries to force you to use the camera as like your aiming reticle, and you could use the stick, but if you like slightly move the Switch, it'll switch to the Switch camera, which is annoying. I wish there's probably a way I could probably just turn it off, but I didn't delve into the settings. It was just getting annoying from a bow and arrow perspective. Yeah. So what else is there to say about this game? Like, I'm thoroughly impressed with it because it was a release title on the Switch. Sorry, I was typing there. It was a release title on the Switch. This and Mario Odyssey were the biggest games I think that came out at the time for it. Maybe Splatoon 2 came out at the time. It was ported from the Wii U, but I think the Wii U version probably failed miserably compared to this, considering Nintendo abandoned the Wii U in a heartbeat. Like I have my complaints, like I said, with the delicacy. Stamina is cool, but I don't know. Maybe I want to get a more linear Zelda, because I focused on Zelda as a kid in a more like put me on a path and tell me the way to go approach, whereas this game is definitely more open world, and that's fine because I'm an open world player. I don't know, maybe that's something that's come to me with Zelda games. But there's also good things about it, like the combat's still the same, and I still always enjoyed Zelda combat. Dodge left, dodge right, flip backwards, call it a day, parry. Or I don't think parry's in this game, but, shield block. Yeah, I don't know. The different powers are a great addition. Like, I feel like I have so much more of this game to play, because, 6 hours isn't like, it's not completing the game by any means. It's 6 hours is barely scratching the surface, if at anything. I will definitely play more of it. As of right now, I could tell you, I mean, this thing's going to be a 50 to 60 to 70 to 80 hour game. I think people put a ton of hours into this. I could see the long play or the replayability with shrines and just more of the RPG aspect of the game. So I could definitely see it becoming a major thing. And if you have a Switch, you probably definitely have this game. The question is, is the Switch worth it to get this game? I'd think from a Zelda perspective, it doesn't damage me at all compared to, like I hated Skyward Sword. I did not like Skyward Sword. I was like, oh, cool, I'm in this sky temple, and I have to point my sky to my sword to the sky to make it shiny. Sometimes that's annoying. It's I don't know. This game takes a different approach to it, and I'm fine with it. And it's still Zelda. It's still the same. It's like I feel like delving into a Zelda storyline at this point, you're just gonna feel like, oh, it's a rehash of the previous one. But maybe that's just me. Regardless, this game goes on sale for like 25% off a lot. Like I think it's $44 on GameStop right now when it's normally $60. So at that price, it's definitely worth it if you have a Switch. Plus, if you have a Switch in general, you should just get it for $60 if it's not on sale, because you're gonna put a crap ton of hours into this. And while the Switch does have games like our Odyssey or Splatoon 2, or it has like the Binding of Isaac on it and all that, there's not like a ton of games to play for the Switch. And this is something you could play on like an airplane or a train or anything like that. You could play it, put it away, and then enjoy yourself. And then, I could see this being, well, I don't know about Game of the Year awards last year, but I could see this being like a Switch title from like years from now that people are just like, this was so complete and perfect. Plus it came out with DLC. I don't know how the DLC is, but who knows? So yeah, I'd recommend it. On to The Last of Us. This is a game I could talk about a lot more. Zelda, like I said, I need to play more, but I needed to review it for the podcast, but I also needed to talk about 5 other games this week. So it's like, there's only so much time I could commit to these. So The Last of Us. This game's made by Naughty Dog. It came out in 2013. It was re-released in 2014 on the PS4. It's a linear single-player, AI accompanied, post-apocalyptic story-driven game. You play as a character named Joel, accompanied by various people, but mainly this girl, Ellie. She's a 14-year-old girl with a very vulgar attitude. Like she's got some heat behind her words when she says anything. Like you could taste the venom when she says it. Joel's basically tasked with delivering Ellie from Boston to this group called the Fireflies. The Fireflies are kind of like a terrorist organization, but they're also kind of like a doing the good for good organization, because the world's so broken that there's like last remnants of like a police force or like a government. They're put in these things called quarantine zones, and the Fireflies fight against that like almost every opportunity they get. Plus, if you go out into like the open world, like beyond the government gates, not only do you get the risk of encountering fireflies, you also get the risk of encountering infected. And infected were the thing that caused the post-apocalyptic thing. It was the cordyceps virus, basically meaning like a mushroom fungi disease, like got all over people's heads. The more you're infected with it, the more this growth comes onto you. It covers you in this mushroom effect, like I said earlier, that it just morphs your entire being. You lose your mind. You become like a 28 days later zombie, but eventually you progress to a point where if you were infected by the virus would take over your brain, and you would go blind. You would become what's called in the game as a clicker, where you rely on sound, and then you still want to bite things or whatever. And then eventually, if you continue past that, you become a bloater, which is where you have like this big, thick, heavy fungi armor. Yeah. And that's like the whole infected backstory. That's the whole cordyceps virus infection. That that's the whole motivation behind the game. Is that Ellie at a point earlier in the game that's described in it's not in this game. It's described in the DLC Left Behind, which you could also get with the remastered version for like $20. In Left Behind, it's explained that Ellie was hanging out with her friend Riley, and she got bit by a zombie, not a zombie, Jesus, bitten by an infected, and she's immune. Like, most people die or turn into an infected within like a few hours. Ellie's had it for weeks, and she's fine. Yeah. So you adventure through Boston, Pittsburgh, Wyoming, Colorado, and Utah, as Joel and Ellie. And it's while it's a game focused on finding an end goal or providing Ellie to the Fireflies with a resolution of like, oh, we could cure this horrible disease that wiped out mankind. It's also like about the camaraderie between Joel and Ellie, and eventually the characters they meet otherwise, like there's Bill, Henry, Sam, Tommy, all these people. And it's also about like the development of the characters as well. Like, Joel is this hardened man who is really used to like loss and pain, and in the beginning of the game there's a big thing that happens with his daughter, and that kind of gives you a vision, and then 20 years later it goes to post-apocalyptic Boston, and then it's just all over the place. Like, Joel definitely has seen a lot of horrible shit in his life, whereas Ellie is also only 14 years old, but she's also like, her mom's dead, all her friends have died, or she's had to leave them behind. Joel is this only guy that's been able to keep her safe, keep her alive, and he's tasked with getting her across the country to wherever the Fireflies are. So where there's bonuses this game, I want to talk about the negatives first, because I'll talk about the bonuses way too much. The infected are really like, there's 4 types. There's runners, stalkers, clickers, bloaters. You see bloaters like 6 times in the game total, and they're mostly like, they throw like a bunch of you at the last, like there's one in Colorado, I think, and then there's another 2 in Utah, and then I think there's like 2 in Boston, if that, in Pittsburgh combined. Like, there's not a lot of bloaters, so they're irrelevant. Clickers are this one-dimensional, like, all you have to do is stealth, get behind them, and then shiv. So while the infected gameplay brings a different element versus humans, it's basically like, when you're around a clicker, you walk slow, you shiv, and then you walk away. When you're around a runner, you get behind them, you choke, and you walk away. When you fight a bloater, you throw Molotovs and then shotgun them or hunting rifle them or whatever to death. It's a stealth-based game, obviously, and with that, it's accompanied by some pretty one-dimensional stealth combat mechanics, and that's fine, because honestly, it feels like the combat's not at times, or at least the infected combat isn't at times the most important part of this game, because I feel like you deal with humans a lot more. Humans are more, I guess, dynamic, but it's very similar in gameplay. The only difference is they have weapons, and some will rush you with baseball bats or pipes or anything like that to try and kill you, and they'll try and shoot you from afar with snipers or pistols, or not snipers, hunting rifles, or your humans bring in the different play of gunplay, I feel, because I feel like the wrong thing to do with infected is to just run in and shoot everything. I feel like that's the wrong approach, and humans, that's still the wrong approach, but you can approach it with like a bow and arrow and snipe from afar, and then humans don't really care about your walking speed, so it's a lot more faster paced when I play it as a human, because I've been playing this thing. There's 5 different difficulties, I think. There's easy, normal, hard, survivor, and grounded. Hard might not exist, but I could be wrong there. I played through this game like 1,000 times on normal and easy way back in the day, and then eventually I was like, all right, time to nut up and play grounded. So I've been playing grounded mode. I'm at the end of Pittsburgh. Like I literally just finished Pittsburgh, and it's definitely become more of a you stealth with the very minimal supplies you have, and you stealth. Like if you can opt for non-combat, that's the move. Like you don't have enough supplies to sustain a long combat or a long battle. Regardless, so that's a negative to the game. One-dimensional one-dimensional combat. I'm trying to think of like another negative from my perspective. I mean, game length could be a concern because the first time I played through this, it took me like, I don't know, maybe 9 to 10 hours. And at this point, I feel like I could blow through it in like 6 hours on like a normal difficulty. Playing on grounded mode is definitely not the case. Grounded mode is taking a lot longer, but like once you know what to do on ground or on normal or easy or even to a point, there's not I feel like there's a difficulty in between. It might be hardened. That might be what it is. I feel like there's difficulty in between the two. Even that one is not as challenging as Survivor or Grounded. Yeah, so game length could be a concern. I feel like there's a lot of replayability in this game because you're focusing so much on what the characters do and what the development is between these relationships that the characters have. Like what happens with Joel and Ellie? Is there a reference that comes back later? Like there's these giraffe stuffed animals all around the game, and I won't tell you what the giraffe thing is, but it comes into play at the end of the game, and it's like, oh yeah, if you see it the first time, you're like, oh, it's so cool that they reference it. Yeah, so getting into the good things, it has a unique crafting system. I haven't seen that before. You pull your backpack off your back, and then with the materials that you pick up throughout the world, whether it's like scrap metal or a cloth or alcohol or anything like that, you can craft med kits, bombs, smoke bombs, nail bombs. You can upgrade shivs or make shivs out of duct tape and I think just glass or something like that. And with that, you can use those shivs to kill clickers easily. And yeah, the crafting system I like because it's like drag and drop right in gameplay. You don't need to go to a table. You don't need to consult like a shop or anything. You pick up the materials in the world, you craft, and then you're good to go. So crafting is cool. I like the story a lot. That's the biggest thing. Sorry, I had to snap that thought to my mind because I gave you the main backstory of the game, but the character development, the voice acting, the way these characters make you feel or make you think, I feel like is something that I haven't encountered in a game before. Joel and Ellie are just like this relationship where while Joel is this hardened, just madman at times, like you also feel for him at a point because it's like he has lost everything, but like being around Ellie has gave him like this feeling of hope at times maybe, or feeling of almost like companionship that he never had before. Like he has it with Tess earlier in the game, but Tess eventually gets out of the picture. Yeah, that's something that like character development is huge in this game, and watching Ellie grow from like this kid that's just like, I don't want to be with this fucking guy, all the way to, this guy means the world to me. And then at the end, the way the game ends, like at the time I was like, oh, there's going to be a Last of Us Part 2. There's going to be a Last of Us Part 2. And then like 3 years passed and I hadn't heard anything. I was like, oh, I guess Naughty Dog's not interested in it. And then they finally announced the Last of Us Part 2 at E3 in 2016, I think. And I was like, oh, thank God. And like I was so happy. It might have been PSX, but I think it was around E3. They finally announced it and it was like, oh, thank God. I've been waiting so long for something like this. Yeah. That's a definite thing. Like character development is number one best part of this game. Voice acting, cinematics, story writing, everything dealing with that side is fantastic. Those minor quips I had at the start are what kind of bothered me a little bit. But it's not enough to make me like not play the game or anything. This is my favorite game ever. Like this is my number one favorite game, but I'm still trying to be able to see why people wouldn't enjoy certain aspects of this game. Like if you don't like a stealth game, you're not going to like this game. You can approach it, play it on easy, and basically try and run a gun, and you could do that, but at its core, if you want to play on the difficulties, you're going to play it on grounded, and you're going to play it like a stealth game. I mean, past that, game length, I can't ask for more out of a single player game. I know Factions did well, like people actually enjoyed Factions. It was like a stealth based Gears of War almost at times, but it also was combined with like this mode where like you have a set number of lives and you have to kill each other, and whoever runs out of lives more, like there was stuff like that. But the stealth part was cool. Listen mode was an important part of the single player, but also the multiplayer, where you can literally see if where a person is, if they're making a lot of noise, and then if they're not making a lot of noise, Also, I wanted to mention that like this game has some of the most pivotal, not pivotal, but most heartbreaking scenes I've seen in a video game. There's a scene at the end with David. I won't say who David is or what David is or what he does, but it's between David and Ellie. That part is like, I showed my girlfriend this game like a year ago. Like I finally was like, we need to sit down and play The Last of Us. Like that's how this relationship's gonna continue. I showed her it, and then I was like, okay, there's a part coming up. I still like it. Still emotionally destroys me. Let's watch it. And then we watched it, and like I was like, I still felt it in my heart. I was like, oh, this still hurts this much later. There's parts where Henry and Sam that if you played it, you know what I'm talking about, that are super heartbreaking. Parts with Tommy come into play a little bit. There's honestly the banter between Joel and Ellie at points. Like there's a point in Wyoming where it becomes like, oh, this is some heavy shit. Like there's different areas of this game or different cutscenes that come up, and it's like, Jesus, like, yeah. So with that, for probably $20, maybe $30, you can get this game. I think it's 20. I'm pretty sure it's 20 on GameStop. I know I've seen it on sale on like Black Friday and stuff like that for like 15 or 10. And with The Last of Us 2 coming, I'd say when I predicted on my last podcast, I would say by June of 2019, but I'm going to honestly push that to like November of 2019. With it coming within probably the next year and a half, hopefully, you need to play this game before that. It's the greatest game of all time in my eyes. Okay, so on to our old games for this week. Let's do the old one first. So Silent Hill 2. This is kind of like a theme I noticed lately. I just try and do a whole bunch of horror games. I'm getting them out of the picture because I feel like that's always a genre that's kind of neglected, is horror games. They're either hit or miss, and people just don't care about them or anything like that. So Silent Hill 2 is regarded as one of the greatest horror games of any release ever, I think. It's a horror game series in a town that is exposed to this people with dark pasts. Like it's not something that's like frequented. It's normally like if you count the characters in Silent Hill 2 that are living, there's like a total of like 10. You follow this character named James Sunderland. He goes to Silent Hill searching for his wife Maria, because for some reason she sent him a letter saying like, come to Silent Hill even though she's dead, which doesn't make sense. Like she's dead, but she somehow sends him a letter. Silent Hill is like this. Like I said, it's a area of the world where, if you have a dark past, the world will go from this like ash-ridden but like quiet and almost like Christmassy, like Christmas walking through an abandoned village, almost like that kind of feeling, to like an other world where you're seeing demons, but they're not demons, they're monsters, and they're spitting acid at you. And then there's this big guy named Pyramid Head with a giant sword that comes after you. And there's these mannequin monsters that have legs for hands, and they beat the shit out of you. You're in this dark apartments, and you're trying to navigate the hallways with like a piece of wood and a flashlight in your pocket. This game gives you a good sense of helplessness. That's something that I don't feel Resident Evil captured too well. Because Resident Evil, like, you're a character with a gun and you shoot these zombies and then you leave the door or you leave the room and the zombie comes back, but you can always just light it on fire and they don't come back later. Whereas Silent Hill, you're like a guy. You're not a soldier. You're a guy looking for his wife, and you have like a piece of wood or a pistol at one point, or a shotgun or a pipe. You don't have guns. You don't have these herbs that heal you magically or anything like that. You're a guy. And that's what makes it so daunting at times, is that you're in these dark apartments. There's a fixed camera, so you're running down this hallway, and then as you're running down this hallway, the camera angle switches, and you see two enemies, and you're like, oh shit, like that feeling is in your heart. Yeah, so I mentioned, the monsters and the world changing and all that. So that's something that I like a lot about this game. There's a lot of depth to the world, whereas like Resident Evil, you're in this mansion, and then that's, you're in a mansion. Like, that's the first Resident Evil, obviously. But you're in a mansion, there's these zombies infected, whatever. Whereas Silent Hill, you're in an entire town ridden with these monsters, and if the siren sounds and the world changes, there's even more monsters, and no one's there to help you. You see these, like, occasional people, like this fat fuck named Eddie, eating pizza out of a fridge for some fucking reason in Silent Hill, which makes no sense, because where the fuck is he gonna get a pizza? Or this little girl named, I think, Lisa, I can't remember her name, that, like, for some reason just doesn't give a shit about you, and she's able to run by these monsters and not get injured at all. And then you meet a girl that looks just like your wife, but it's not your wife, which is weird. And she's like able to die at certain points and then come back later and be mad at you about it for some reason. Yeah, there's twists in the gameplay that show you, or not the gameplay, in the story that show you like what these characters do and what makes them unique to their own story. Because like there's, how many Silent Hills is there? Like 8 between the first one, second one, third one, fourth. Origins, Homecoming, Downpour. Yeah, there's a lot of Silent Hill games. There was going to be another one with Norman Reedus, produced by Guillermo del Toro and Hideo Kojima, and that got canceled and all this shit. There's a lot of controversy behind the games as well, because some people feel like it adventured more from a horror game into an action game at points, but this game is entirely a horror game. This game's like, I can't stress enough, like, you feel the pressure of being alone. Like, I played this game when I was maybe 10, maybe 13, in that range, and I felt fear. Like, the only time I felt a fear like that when I was a kid was Resident Evil 0, which I loaded up Resident Evil 0 when I was 2001, 2002. So I had to be less than 10 years old. And I loaded up Resident Evil 0. It turned on my GameCube. You're on the train. A zombie stands up and is walking towards you. I turned the game off. I was like, nope, that's scary. Silent Hill 2 did that to me 2 years later. Like, the only difference is I kept playing Silent Hill 2 because I was like, no, it's a video game. It's fine. So let's talk about some bad things with this game. Endings aren't a bad thing. There's a bunch of different endings, which is cool. There's a UFO ending, which is kind of funny. There's a good ending. There's a bad ending. But the bad things, like combat, is not. I would not recommend the combat in this game, like at the time, because there's very limited animations. James will like hold up a stick and bring it down, and he'll slightly kick, and that like kills enemies on the ground, but you have to do it like 6 times, and it's the same repeated animation. Gunplay is garbage because you're using a fixed camera angle, and you basically need to hope that you auto lock on the target, or you're aiming at the target even though you don't like have an aiming reticle or anything like that. Plus, if you use the gun, I feel like you're at a disadvantage because you're standing still. You can't shoot and move. What else? The fog in the game can get annoying because like with the camera angles, you'll literally be staring at fog. Or you won't know where to go. Like you can feel lost in this game. And it's like, that's where we also get into this part. There is 17,000 doors in this game, between the prison, between the apartments, between the hospital. There's a million different locked doors, but you're always looking for that one fucking door for some reason that isn't locked or doesn't have a broken lock. And for some reason, every other fucking door is broken in this game. It doesn't make sense. You can literally bash down the door. Whatever. Uh, what's another bad part? Fixed camera angles, I don't like in any video game because there's always going to be a bad camera angle with that. With fixed camera angles, you'll literally have a situation where you won't be able to see your character, but he's getting hit by something. That mainly comes into play in the apartments because you're like in these apartments. Plus, with the fixed camera angle, they hope that with like the camera when it switches, that you'll be able to see this little smidgen that shows a key, like that little bit. It says a little bit. Oh, there's a key, like that, and that's fucking annoying. Crossing the lake in the middle of this game gets annoying because you have to, for some reason, you have to get on a fucking rowboat and ride across this lake. That felt stupid. The environments do get repetitive between Toluca Prison, the hospital, the apartments. It's all like you're inside, and yeah, you're like in a hospital versus apartments, but in reality, you're walking down a dark hallway looking for a fucking door. That's what it feels like. Walking the streets is fun in this game because you see like a whole bunch of different stuff, or you're encountering monsters and then you're fighting them, or you can run away and then you find items that come into play later or anything like that. Yeah, I love the atmosphere in this game. People complained, by the way, because there's an HD collection of this game that came with Silent Hill 3. Which is also a fantastic game. Silent Hill 3 is really good. There was an HD collection where they redid a whole bunch of the voices. Troy Baker started playing. He did the voice of Joel in The Last of Us. He replaced James Sunderland as the voice in Silent Hill Homecoming, or not Silent Hill Homecoming, Silent Hill 2. They switched up the voices. People complained about it. It didn't bother me too much, but I could see how it annoyed you if you're like loyal to the franchise and you're like, who the fuck is this guy's voice? But regardless of that, I mean, you get it for like $25 at GameStop, I think, or $30 on Amazon. Yeah, it's 10 years old, I think, because it came out in 2009. I think the collection came out, maybe 2010. But you're getting a lot of value in it because Silent Hill 2, you're going to be able to play for a long time, and Silent Hill 3, you're going to be able to play for a long time. You're going to, like, this is a turn the lights off and get scared type of game, and that's something I enjoy and something that's hard to find in horror games nowadays. So I would recommend it for less than like $20. If you're not a horror game fan and you're more like the action side of horror, like Resident Evil 7 piques your interest, this is probably not the game for you. But I would recommend it. Onto another game that has horror gothic style themes. So Bloodborne. It's another game from the people that made Dark Souls, people that made Demon Souls. It's a From Software game. It's an action RPG. You're playing in like a not Victorian, but like a Gothic themed London-esque area where almost like Jack the Ripper, where you're a hunter, and your main desire is looking for this thing called the Pale Blood, and then like your tool is also just regular blood. You encounter like violent villagers, or there's beasts or other eventual enemies that I won't list that come into play. The blood gives you more power. It gives you souls or anything like that, like it would in Dark Souls, where like you power your character up. It heals you, all that stuff. But you're not a vampire. You're a hunter, which is something to clarify. Like, I don't know, maybe that's weird to get used to at first. So if you played a Dark Souls or a Demon Souls or a Dark Souls 2 or anything like that, you probably know how this game plays. It does play faster than most of them. You have like this dodge roll mechanic, obviously, but the thing that makes it faster from my perspective is one, I feel like there's no heavy armor in this game. I feel like armor is irrelevant. Like you're just in cloth jacket or a top hat or something like that, and your rolls and your actions are never affected by the armor you have. But like regardless of that makes it faster. But on top of that, there's like a health regen system by attacking an enemy more after you were recently hit. Like it's a health regen where like if you get hit by something, you have a bit of a save where you can hit the thing that hit you repeatedly and you'll get health back for the health that you just lost. That makes it more faster and a little more button spammy, which that's a problem. Like the game is more button spammy at times. But I feel like it doesn't break the game. A positive to this game is that with it, you're like, I brought up the Victorian Gothic whatever you want to call it, era that this game is played in. I think this style that they have, as far as like the town with the villagers that have gone mad and all this stuff, that's a style that rivals Dark Souls 1. Like, I like Dark Souls 1 a lot because the world felt super, I don't know what the term would be, maybe dynamic. It felt dynamic where, like, you're not forced on a path. You could just load into the world, and then the world is open, and there's all this stuff, and then you find stuff that links back to an earlier reference point in the game, and then, you know, that point makes it easier for you to get to this from this lantern and all that. And that's something that Bloodborne does really well. I feel like they didn't capture that with Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2 felt a lot more linear than Dark Souls 1 or Bloodborne does. And that's something that Bloodborne definitely has on it. A negative to this game for me versus the other games is that they like throw really hard bosses at you at first. Like, I know it's so dumb to say really hard bosses. Like, the Cleric Beast is easy, but Father Gascoigne is difficult for people who haven't. They're like, this was the first game after Dark Souls that I played and like actually committed myself to. So after, like, when I played it, Father Gascoigne is up in your face. Like, you don't have the parry ability with your shotgun or your pistol or whatever you have. He's like up in your face. He transforms into a werewolf, and yeah, you could use the music box to make it easier, but he will destroy you. Like, there's people I know that have borderline destroyed controllers because of that boss. It's not an easy easy task for you to complete. So they throw him at you, and then they throw like the blood-starved beast after him, and then, you know, there's Vicar Aemilius, where I think it's Vicar Aemilius. It's one of the priest ones where she'll heal if you don't do enough damage. Like, you'll literally just be caught in this perpetual fight because she'll just out heal you. Like, that's annoying and that's frustrating. Like, they shouldn't throw these bosses at you, because towards the end, the bosses I feel like were super easy. Like, the wet nurse I feel like was a joke. I feel like I didn't have that much of a problem with the last hunter. I'm not going to say what it is, but, you know, I feel like that didn't come into, like, that didn't make me like as angry as fighting Father Gascoigne or the other ones at first. So that's definitely it. Like, that's the thing with all Dark Souls games or Souls games, is that it feels like it always ramps up in the beginning, and then at the end you're coasting. Like, you don't feel challenged, and that's not gonna be a negative. I mean, the twist in the backstory is a good thing. Like, I like that there's a shift halfway through the game that I can't say it, but like you start encountering these different enemies, and then you're like, wait, what does this mean? And then, like, you see these things, and it makes references towards the moon and stuff, and you're like, oh, like that's pretty cool. You encounter random other hunters in this game. It's not like they're like player-controlled players. They're just NPC AI, but they're very difficult to beat. At one point, I think they send like 3 of them at you, and it's like encountering another hunter is definitely a difficult task. So that's something that I feel like could be more difficult than bosses at a time. Especially considering, like, it's limiting you. Like, you'll know there's a lantern coming up, and then you'll see these hunters, and you're like, motherfucker, like, yeah. So I can't think of another negative. Dark Souls approaches their style with Estus flasks, where you can use that to heal. It's something that replenishes every time you go to a bonfire. It's limited to 10 if you find all the shards and stuff like that. Bloodborne, your healing system is done with blood vials, which can be annoying because eventually you can run out of blood vials. At the most, you can have 20 on your person, but you can reach a point where you literally don't have blood vials left, and then what are you going to do? You have to go farm blood vials, and that takes forever, because there's a certain path you could do that eventually makes it easier for you to farm blood vials, but that's not something I should be doing. That's something that wasn't a part of Dark Souls. Like, in Dark Souls, you just played the game, and you got Estus flasks at bonfires, and then you continued, and you replenished, and you continued, and you replenished. It kept you moving, whereas Bloodborne, it could be a stopgap at points, because you'll need all 20 blood vials or quicksilver bullets or whatever it may be that's a limited capacity. You'll need those for a boss, and that annoys me. It's something, I don't know, whatever. And then another negative for me is that bosses their design feels repeated after a while, and that's not like the mechanics in the fight. I mean, like, after a while, you're just fighting different versions of a beast or a werewolf looking thing, and that's it. Like, I don't feel like you're like Dark Souls 1, you're fighting a butterfly, but then you're fighting a wolf, but then you're fighting a human, and then you're fighting like two like construct things. I don't know what you would call them in Anne Orlando. You're fighting all these different things, whereas this game, like, it feels like beast, new enemy, I won't say, beast, some human-esque things, and then finally like an entity at the end, and then all that. It just felt like a lot of beasts after another, and I know that's the main theme of the game, but it didn't take a lot away from me. I just felt like there was a lot of beast theme in this. With all that, if you like ARPGs, if you like Dark Souls, if you like Demon Souls, if you like Dark Souls 3, if you like Dark Souls 2, you'll probably like this game a lot. It's a easier Dark Souls for me, because it wasn't like Dark Souls 1 was really difficult the first time I played it, and this game was really difficult the first time I played it, but eventually you ease into this game a lot easier. Parrying can be a lot more forgiving at times, I feel, with this game, because you can shoot from a distance, and the parrying, and then get a visceral attack, and then do damage, and then that's something that I feel like wasn't captured as well in Dark Souls. Like, using a shield and parrying wasn't as easy, because you had to be in melee range, and you had to time it right, whereas this game, you could spam bullets, and then it could get you to go. So that's something, like, also to bring up, is that the parrying system was a lot more forgiving in this game, and this game in general is a lot more forgiving, which for a Dark Souls fan might bother you, because some Dark Souls fans are elitists, and they're basically like, if the game's not hard enough, then it's a bad game. So if you want like an easier Dark Souls, if you want a first approach to the action RPG style, and you haven't played these before, I would recommend Bloodborne, because it's going to ease you into the environment, to the controllers, or the controls, to everything. Whereas like approaching Dark Souls with Dark Souls 2, you're going to get more of a linear experience, and it's a lot more annoying with the way the world's designed. Dark Souls 2 also had the negative of weapon durability, which for some reason wasn't as big of a deal in this game, whereas in Dark Souls 2, you can literally break your weapon and then be stuck beating people with your fists. That's something that was annoying about Dark Souls 2 that they fixed in this game. Dark Souls 1, I'd say, is the second game to go with in this series, because Dark Souls 1 is it's a cornerstone as far as like this style goes. Like there's a lot of following behind it, and it's for good reason. And I talked about Dark Souls last week or the week before, and I'd recommend that wholeheartedly. So if you haven't played the Souls games before, I'd recommend you start with this one. If you don't like the Souls games, stay the hell away from this game. And if you're gonna get it, I mean, it's $10 to $15 most of the time on like GameStop or Amazon or anything like that. I think it was on the PS4 store recently for like $20 with this and the DLC, the Old Hunters that came out. Yeah, I'd recommend it. So on to Tomb Raider from 2013. This was their first reboot, or their first attempt at a reboot. Hang on, let me get a drink. Sorry. This was their first attempt at rebooting the franchise. I feel like they did Tomb Raider Underworld in 2008. They may have done Tomb Raiders before that, but yeah, it felt like the series was abandoned for a while. They stopped with like the Angelina Jolie approach, and they took, I think the new voice actress was Camilla Luddington, I think is her name. It's a lot more, it like Lara Croft, the whole point is she's exploring these tombs, she's exploring these shrines, she's solving puzzle platformers, and then eventually reaching a goal of treasure or whatever. That's the main thing. You're a treasure hunter. It's Indiana Jones. It's Uncharted. It's that style. You're trying to find these different treasures, and you're going for wealth. So you go to this thing called the Dragon's Triangle with a bunch of like your college frat friends, which is kind of annoying because like they're all like, yeah, we're so cool, we're gonna get so rich, and Laura's like, oh, we gotta take this seriously, and you have the one fucking loser guy named Alex or whatever his name is, with glasses, and he's a nerd, and I didn't like him as a character. You have Roth, who's like the serious, he's your mentor. I liked him as a character, but yeah. And then Reyes is like the hardened like douchebag of the group. She doesn't wanna, she's just like, let's get in and get out and leave, like. Yeah, and then you have these other two that I feel like Sam I don't know, she comes into play later in the game, but I felt like, ooh, it's the innocent girl. And then I don't know the last guy's name, the nerdy one or the Hawaiian looking one. He had like the tattoos like a Samoan. So yeah, you're going to this thing called the Dragon's Triangle. You're separated from your friends. You're taken by like a group of Russian pillagers. You're on this island, and your helicopter, your plane or whatever crashes because for some reason, whenever a fucking aircraft comes to this island, it gets stuck on this island and they can't fucking leave. That's the theme of the game. Like anytime you see it, it's like no one leaves, and then you can't fucking leave. The game is taken from a more virgin standpoint with Lara Croft, meaning like she's a virgin to this. She hasn't done these things before. She hasn't fought wolves before. She hasn't explored these kinds of tombs. She hasn't fought people. She hasn't killed anyone, I don't think, in the game before like the start of it. There's a more innocent style of her, but eventually she becomes like this hardened murderous psychopath, which kind of bothered me. So with the brutality of all that, the combat reminds me kind of like Far Cry 3 when you have like the bow and arrow sequences where you're like sitting in a bush and then you see an enemy, you shoot the enemy, he falls down. Someone goes over to investigate the body, you shoot him, he falls down. You progress to the next bush, do that. Like that's the stealth style. But then there's like a situation where they'll just send endless swarms of enemies at you for some reason, and you have like a submachine gun, a pistol, and a shotgun, and you're just gunning down people from one spot behind like a bunch of barrels or something. Like they're running at you with machetes or submachine guns or whatever, and it just feels like they're sending endless waves of people at you, which is annoying from my perspective because I'm like, I'm not playing Call of Duty, I'm not playing Far Cry even, I'm playing Tomb Raider. I thought the whole point of Tomb Raider was the platforming puzzle-y side where you're discovering new things and you're doing a whole bunch of stuff to basically find treasure. That didn't feel like that was a big theme in this game. That bothered me a lot. The tomb exploration as far as puzzles go, I felt like it wasn't very difficult. It's a lot of like weird like timing puzzles or anything like that, or you open these certain things and then you're able to progress to a platform. I mean, there's only so many ways you could do puzzle platformers like that, but I feel like they could have done a little more. They incorporated some light RPG elements too, where like you can upgrade your weapons, you can upgrade your character, meaning like you have these different skill trees between like killing, scavenging, and some other ones, where you can put points into it and it does bonus things like you'll knife someone when you kill them, or when you down them, and then it'll instantly kill them as opposed to them like being in a down position and you can't do anything. So that, I don't know, that they added it and it felt cool, but like I said, like I feel like the combat was way too much of a main point in this game, and that bothered me. So just to bring up some more negatives, because I feel like positive of the game I listed earlier. I like the theme of it. I like that you're going to this island. I like Lara. I like the new approach to Lara. But I don't like the combat where they send a whole bunch of enemies at you. The game is really short. I'm on like the last level. Like I looked up the total amount of levels and I looked it up and I was like, oh, I'm on the last level. Like I got the steamboat, the pulley system or whatever it is they have you do. And then you go on to the next part and it's like, yeah, you're pretty much done with the game. So I think I maybe like 5.5, maybe 5 hours played in this game. And I'm like, wow, I'm almost done with it. And it's my first time playing it. So game length is definitely a concern. Animal hunting is a joke. Like they have a whole entire skill tree in it, but it feels like you don't need to hunt animals at all. They send wolves at you. It doesn't really matter. You treat them just like you treat humans. You shoot them. I don't know. I don't really enjoy the hunting. I don't really enjoy the stealth mechanics because it feels like a lesser version of The Last of Us, which I know that's bad to say to compare these two, but I don't know, at least The Last of Us, the enemies have the sense to not stand still when they discover a dead body. They'll like look around and they'll alert other people, and then other people will come to that corpse, as opposed to you killing the two people, walking to the next guys, and for some reason they don't see their bodies, and then yeah, that bothers me a lot. Cutscenes also bothered me because there was a lot of camera wobble for some reason. Like it'll just be Laura talking to whoever, and then it'll just show her like standing there, but for some reason the camera's all over the place, like it's shaking like crazy, and I did not like that at all. And I feel like identity in this game is a problem, because at times you're doing the puzzle platformy side, or you're doing the stealth side, or you're doing any of that, but then at other times you're playing like an action game, like a shooter, like a Call of Duty or a Far Cry, or Halo, honestly, because they're just sending endless waves of enemies at you. They're on this friggin' borderline oil platform, and they're jumping down on zip lines, and you're just shooting them out of the air, and then you're shooting the people that come from the low side, shooting them that coming from the high side, and it doesn't feel super challenging. It doesn't, I don't know. The identity there felt weird. I mean, it also felt like they were trying to be a horror game in the beginning, because like you're stuck in this cave and this guy's trying to grab you and he's like, I'm trying to save you, but it's like jumpy parts, like you're just walking through this dark cave and then he shows up and you run under a boulder and he's like trying to grab your leg and all that. It's like, why are you trying to be like a horror game? That's weird. So identity was a big problem with this game. With all that said, though, like, I mean, the game looks good. Like, it came out in 2013, but visually, I'm still like, oh, this game looks pretty good. Like, I'm playing it on Ultra at 2560 by 1440, 144 hertz, and it runs like a top, and it looks good. But I mean, that won't hold me over into this next part. For less than $10, I can recommend it, because you're going to play through it once and then you're probably never going to play through it again unless you really, really, really enjoy it, which I don't think anyone would, to the level of like keeping this game long term. So for less than $10, I'd say to get it. For anything more than 10, that's really steep. I haven't played like Shadow of the Tomb Raider or Rise of the Tomb Raider, if those have both been released yet. It feels like they're kind of treating this game, Square Enix is trying to treat this game like Assassin's Creed, where they're just going to come out, they know the formula, and they could just come out with Lara Croft in different environments. That's where I'm like, so I don't know. $10 even is a question for me, because I mean, you could watch a YouTube stream and you could get the same feeling I got out of this game. It's like the Lara Croft differences are nice, but I don't feel like it's enough to make me want to say to get this game right now. I wouldn't even say that. Maybe I'll play Shadow of the Tomb Raider eventually, and that might change my perspective on this game. But for right now, less than $10, yeah, probably, but more than 10, I'd stay the hell away from it. So to close out the podcast, next week's games are Cuphead from 2017, Resident Evil 7 from 2017, Skate from 2007, Dead Space from 2008, and Bioshock from 2007. Cuphead's going to be a weird review because it's very aggressive. The game is like meant to be in your face, hard. It's like, it's the Dark Souls of 2D platformer. Shut up. I'm in the middle of it right now, and it's frustrating, to say the least. Resident Evil 7, it's a horror game, shooter. It was focused more on the first-person shooter style. Dead Space is also the same style, where it's like horror, but it's third person, you're in space, and you're fighting zombies and all that. Skate was a twin-stick skateboarding game, where instead of like Tony Hawk, where you're pressing Y to grind, you will actually ollie by flicking on your stick to like the ollie motion, and then getting on the rail and grinding and all that. And Bioshock was like a single-player utopia underwater theme game that came out a while ago. That one I think I'm going to have a good time reviewing. With all that, I think that captured most of what I thought of every game. Next week is going to be hopefully a little more, I guess to the point, because I'm going to try and review it from like a first timer's perspective. These games, like I'd already played Bloodborne, I'd already played Tomb Raider, I'd already played Silent Hill 2, but I refreshed my brain because I still have all of them. Or no, I hadn't already played Tomb Raider. I had played the other two. And The Last of Us I had already played. But the way Cuphead's going, you're going to get a full-fledged, very angry review. Resident Evil 7, who knows how I'm going to feel about it. I mean, I've played it before. I want to see how it aged since then, because it's been over a year since I played it. Dead Space I haven't played in 10 years, because that game came out 10 years ago. Skate, I doubt it aged very well, and Bioshock I haven't played in full, ever. So, yeah. This has been Gaming Reversal. If, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, timestamps are irrelevant at this point. Sorry, I'm just trying to go off the script in my head. Timestamps are irrelevant, but if you want to suggest any games, if you want to suggest any comments or any ways to make the show better or anything like that, you can email us at gamingreversalpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at GR_podcast. That's Gary Roger _podcast on Twitter. We're on Google Play and iTunes, which is probably one of the places that you're listening to this. We're Gaming Reversal on YouTube. We have a website at gamingreversal.com, and podcasts for the first time every week are always published on gamingreversal.libsyn.com. And that's where you'll be able to catch them as soon as they get released. With all that, I've been your host, Steven Vecchiarelli. Thank you, everyone that listened to the past two episodes. Both of the past two episodes have been up in like the 60 to 70 download range. I think that has a lot to do with Reddit and Twitter promotion, but it really does. I can't say enough how much I appreciate people watching or listening to this, because it's something that I meant to do to entertain myself, but also get my thoughts out there on certain games, and also just meant to, give people ideas for something to play. I'm always looking for something to play. Yeah. So with that, I'm your host, Steven Vecchiarelli. This has been the 5th episode of Gaming Reversal. I'll catch you guys next week. And then the week after, we're going to have a big episode with a whole bunch of guests. Thank you, and good night.